Alex here with a high conflict child custody video on alimony revisited. What I wanted to talk about in this video is the direction that alimony is going in Texas. This happened rather recently, at least that's my understanding. Texas apparently rehauled the alimony system. I guess they also call it spousal maintenance, and they made it a lot harder to get alimony and a lot harder to keep alimony. The big thing that I'm in favor of when it comes to something like this is the fact that they passed a series of statutes that controls the court as to what they can order. Um, the problem that I'm kind of going to glaze over right now is really discussed in detail in my video, discretion. When you give the judges way too much discretion to do whatever it is that they want to do, that's where you start to see bias bleed through. That's where incompetence starts to do a lot more damage. And that's also where people feel a lot of the unfairness comes from, because there's these inconsistent awards or these inconsistent decisions between the various different judges as to how they're going to deal with a specific thing under the law, because the legislature has afforded them way too much discretion, way too much latitude. So in the sense that this makes things a lot stricter and a lot more predictable, I'm obviously in favor of that, and that's something that I want to see happen in all 50 states, in all areas of family law, not just in alimony. So what did they do in Texas? What they did was they made it really hard to get alimony. So the first thing that you have to show to even be considered, this doesn't mean you're going to get it, this is to just be considered, is you have to show that you were either married for 10 years or you have to show that your ex was convicted of family violence. Not an allegation, but actually convicted of family violence within the last 2 years before the petition for divorce was filed. If you can't show one of those two things, you can't even get considered. That's what I'm reading. That's my understanding of it. Again, with all my previous videos, I'm not in Texas, first of all. Many of you may not even be in Texas, so this doesn't apply to you. But even if you are in Texas, you need to look into the actual statutes yourself and do your own research, because this is something just like any other area of the law where there could be exceptions, and there could be exceptions to the exceptions, and there could be all kinds of nooks and crannies and oddball situations that arise that I just didn't look at because I'm not trying to figure out this whole thing by myself, because I'm not there. Even in Nevada, I have a lot of experience in certain areas, but I don't have all of the experience to the point that I know exactly what's going to happen in every little teeny tiny situation. So the only reason I'm even going through this is because I know that a lot of people talk about my video discretion, and this is a video that kind of talks about one state in particular tackling that problem, the problem of too much discretion. So apparently now, to be even considered for alimony, there are those two requirements. If somebody does satisfy one of those two requirements, then they have to prove that they satisfy all 5 of these factors. They have to show that they um, lack the financial resources to support themselves. They have to show that their education and employment skills are wanting. They have to show the duration of the marriage is considered. They have to show that their age and employment history and earning ability, and that their emotional and physical well-being is basically at risk if they don't get their alimony. And then they also have to show that they're taking efforts to seek suitable employment. In fact, that last one right there is a big enough deal that alone will disqualify somebody from getting spousal maintenance. They may satisfy all the other factors and really need the money, and they may have education and employment skills issues where they need to develop new skills and go to school and stuff. But if they aren't showing that they're trying to seek employment, boom, they're disqualified from getting alimony. In fact, I've also heard that sometimes they will get an award of alimony, and then months or even a year later, the ex will take them back to court and say, hey, as soon as they got out of court, they just gave up. And that can be used as a basis to terminate that spousal maintenance award. I have seen that there are also limitations on the duration. From what I've read, I thought it was 2 years at first, but it appears that it's actually 3 years. It's capped at 3 years, which is pretty crazy, because you take California, for example. In California, if you're married for 10 years, that's lifetime alimony. Whereas in Texas, you have to be married for 10 years just to even be considered for alimony. And even if you get it, it's only for 3 years now. The other thing that's interesting is the percentage is capped at 20% of the ex-spouse's average monthly income or $2,500. What I wonder is, I wonder if it's one or the other, as in like, sorry, I wonder if it's the higher of the two or if it's the lesser of the two. I imagine it's the lesser of the two, because if it's the higher of the two and you have somebody who's earning hardly any money, that $2,500 could kill them, financially strangle them. So it's probably the lesser of the two. So even in a situation where a spouse marries a very wealthy individual, they're going to be capped at that $2,500 per month. That's interesting. The other issue is that they have this phrase now. They call it minimum reasonable needs. Apparently, now, from what I've heard, before, spousal maintenance was supposed to keep that spouse at a financial situation that they were accustomed to over the course of their marriage. In Texas, it appears to me that they only need to provide for their minimal, reasonable needs. That's got to be a big deal right then and there itself, that you only have to provide for their minimal needs. And even then, the needs have to be reasonable. That's a pretty big deal. I looked into a couple of other details. Do they order spousal maintenance for people who are living together but not married? The answer is no. I don't think that's really that big of a shock. I think a lot of states follow that principle. If you're not married, you don't get maintenance no matter what. And then the other thing that I was curious about is I imagine there was probably some kind of exception for people who were disabled, like severely disabled. Apparently, from what I've looked into, if you have a disability in Texas, the time frame can be extended indefinitely. But I'm sure that they scrutinize that disability to see just how disabled a person is. And from what I've seen, if the disability for some reason ends, the alimony and spousal support also ends. The last thing I was curious about is what happens if one spouse puts the other through school. I was wondering if it's possible for, after the separation, for the person who had gotten their degree to now be forced to help their ex go through school as well. I didn't find anything on that, but I was curious about that. These are things I'd probably look into if I was actually in Texas. Again, I'm in Nevada. I usually do videos on Nevada. This is the first time I've ever done a video that was not in Nevada, but I wanted to do it because number one, a lot of people hated the alimony video, even though that wasn't my personal opinion. I was just trying to tell people the way it works. And number two, I really am interested in seeing things like this happen in other states, where states clamp down on these areas of the law that the judges have way too much discretion. And alimony is for sure one of the ones where they had way too much discretion, at least in Nevada. Please watch my video Discretion, because you'll understand more of why this is a big deal to me. If anyone is in Texas, please post in the comments below if you've dealt with this spousal maintenance system, whether you were the one that got a very limited amount of spousal support, or whether you were the one that benefited from it and only had to maintain your spouse for a short amount of time and for a small amount of money. Also, if you are in another state that has an alimony or spousal support system that mimics or at least mirrors this Texas scheme, definitely let people know. I think people will be interested to know that. And of course, I'm sure people are going to be curious about alimony all around. So if there's people that are in states like California, where it's very easy to get the award, in fact, it may be mandatory to get the award, and also where there are certain situations that a person could be entitled to lifetime alimony, that's a big deal. Post that in the comments below. I think the last thing I want to mention is I'm curious if anyone in any other state specifically is aware of a requirement to seek employment. I'm seeing this here in this change in Texas, but I don't think I've ever heard of that before anywhere else. If anyone is in another state where you can go to court and say, hey, my ex isn't trying hard enough to get a job, and have their spousal support terminated, post that in the comments below, because that's something that's quite fascinating to me. So I think with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this video, and I will see you guys next time.